everyone. Thank you and welcome. The man sitting to my left, I'm Mike DiStefano, by the way. I work at TSN.
Mike,
Known as
TSN, salute.
Al's brother.
Salute, Mike.
Thank you very much. But with me, we got Rocket Ismail. I'm sure a lot of you guys know who he is. All-American football star for the Fighting Irish, member of the College Football Hall of Fame, Grey Cup champion, Grey Cup MVP, Rocket Ismail. I gotta ask. Let's start with the Grey Cup stuff because that is known as one of the coldest games to ever have been played. What was that like?
So that was normal just because I was born on the East Coast in New Jersey.
Yeah.
Weathers wasn't as treacherous. However, I was used to the cold. Jersey, my father died, lived in Detroit for 6 months, cold. Pennsylvania, cold. South Bend, Indiana. There's nothing south about it. It's at the south bend of Lake Michigan, so you got that lake effect on the weather, so cold. I'm used to it. So when I came up to Toronto, even though it was cold, the only thing that was really concerning about that game was that's the first time I experienced cold to the degree that it changed the texture of leather.
Oh.
Where the ball felt like glass. No, it felt like, it was like, wait a minute, this is a different chemistry going on. So outside of that, though, it wasn't a big deal. Now, I'll say this. I do know for a fact that after I left Toronto and went to Los Angeles with the Raiders, my tolerance for inclement weather, whether it was extreme cold or extreme hot, like in Miami and 100% humidity and stuff like that, like I lost my mental toughness for probably 4 years.
Really?
After that, man, I could tell the difference, and it snuck up on me. But looking back on it, I was like, oh man, okay, that was I was not able to maintain just the robustness in my attitude towards cold weather after that, and it took a while for me to get that back.
So that's like one of the coldest games. I mean, Winnipeg's cold in general, and then that game specifically was insane. But I do want to ask you this. I'm sure you get this a lot, obviously. The decision to forego the NFL and to come to play for the Toronto Argonauts.
Right.
But what I want to know is, like, what was the reaction from, like, friends and family when you said, I'm not going to go play for the Cowboys, America's team. I'm going to go play up north in the CFL for the Toronto Argonauts?
So you got to remember, at the time, which was the spring semester at Notre Dame, so I'm going back in the middle of January when the spring semester starts up, even though it's still full-blown winter. The decision to forego my senior year decided to go and declare myself eligible. Then, because I was going to potentially be the first pick of the NFL draft, the way the NFL structured it was everybody who had the opportunity to pick, like, so all the worst teams, they had first dibs. And because of what happened when John Elway came out and became, I think the Baltimore Colts had his pick. And he didn't want to play for the Baltimore Colts, so he just took a baseball contract and went with the Yankees. Because of that, the NFL instated a rule where you had to have a contract signed prior to the draft, and when you sign that contract, then whoever has the first pick will take you. Well, that's what I ran into. So I just remember in my dorm room, I would get a call from my attorney, and I spoke to like 5 teams. I think it was the Patriots, the Cowboys, the Browns, the Falcons, and I forget what the fifth team was.
Team out there.
But I just remember all of them offering the same contract. It was a 5-year contract, $1.5 million for the total payout, and it would
You're
be
born 30 years too early, eh?
oh man, it was a $400,000 signing bonus, and then the rest of the 1.1 would be prorated over the 5 years, and so I was just like, okay, it was almost what could I do? I didn't really have leverage because there is no leverage now. There is, but I didn't know that there was, and I didn't play any other sports or anything like that. Well, I ran track, but that's not a paying sport. So I just remember, like, okay, this is that's going to be my contract when I go to the NFL. And I just probably 2 weeks later, my attorney called and he was like, hey, I just got a call from this guy out of Los Angeles who owns the Kings. I was like, there's a Los Angeles Kings football team? He's like, no, this is hockey. I was like, hockey? And so that call led into having a conversation with Bruce McNall. He flew me out to Los Angeles, and when I was in Los Angeles, he was just like, yeah, he gave me his vision and everything he wanted to do, and I'm sitting there because he's like, and oh, by the way, we'll give you a base salary of, $4 million. And I was just like, wait, huh? In my mind, it was like, it was surreal. And it wasn't something that I felt like, it just kind of like $4 million, but you don't have that just doesn't seem like something that's like a reality that doesn't exist. So I was like, okay. And then he broke down how he wanted to do it. Really nice guy. And then he was telling me all of the things that he was going to add to it to make the deal sweeter. And it was just crazy, man. He's just adding this. And I was just like, wow. So I'm sitting there, and I'm like, okay. And then gave the plan on how he wanted to announce it so that it could have maximum media exposure. And then the next thing you know, instead of getting drafted, we announced it like the day before the draft or the day of the draft, and it was in the football world. It was a big deal,
Set ablaze.
and news just went across, even back before there was a
people
social
call you
media
at
situation. No,
You get called, someone's like, are you crazy? Like, what
the
are you
only
thinking?
phone number I had was the phone in my dorm room in Grace Hall at Notre Dame.
Yeah.
And that's the only we didn't have cell phones.
That's true.
So I was insulated to a degree. I was insulated from any external questioning influence,
Pressure.
which I love. I mean, looking back on it, that was heaven. So from there, the next thing I know, I'm flying all across Los Angeles, flying up to Toronto, meet the team, then flying to. Bruce McNall would always fly us through Vegas, so we would go through customs, and then we'd be able to go hang out in Las Vegas and hit the casinos and stuff. And shucks, next thing you know, I'm living on my own in what was the university in Wellington. There was this new
Big
apartment
condo.
building,
Yeah.
and shucks, so it began.
So it began, and it turned out very well. Won a championship.
Yes.
VP.
Man, it was great actually because the team was it was like all the pieces were all in place, and it was like when I was in school, I was insulated at Notre Dame. I was insulated from, because you're young, and if guys are, like I didn't feel jealousy or envy or anything like that. I'm just my natural personality is like a people pleaser.
Yeah.
So my way of dealing with conflict is to, hey, I'm a nice guy. I don't want any problems, and let's make everything work well. Well, as you move up in the food chain, you have to have some kind of boundaries that you set, and I didn't know how to do all that. So I say that to say the environment of the team here, the best way to sum all of it up was DK Smith. He was like the all-star flanker. And I remember he would always say, in a joking way, but he was serious, he was like, hey, bruh, we don't want you, but we need you.
Yeah.
And he's like, you're the piece that makes all of it work, where now we can all flourish and get to the highest level. And that's exactly how it worked, and ended up getting to the Grey Cup and winning it. And man, it was fun.
Did you gain an appreciation for the Canadian game? Like, once you got up here and once you started playing, like, did you gain more of an appreciation for it?
Man, let me tell you something. I'm waiting, like how the NFL is now pretty wide. I mean, it's wide open. There's still elements of, 3 yards in a cloud of dust in the philosophy. But I'm waiting for, like, the NFL to make the fields a little bigger and to have that element of, when you kick field goals, if you miss them, you can return them.
Oh, that's it.
And I thought from a safety perspective, they would adopt how if you get the ball punted to you, there's like a 5-yard barrier, invisible barrier you can't break until just from a safety standpoint.
I completely agree with you. I'm surprised that the NFL has not adopted.
Man, I'm telling, I feel like it's on the horizon. But man, it was a little weird when I looked into the secondary and I would see that extra guy back there. It was like my mind, it was like learning how to read another language. But once that came into play, man, it was an excellent experience, and I'm totally thankful for it.
I got one more question for you, and then we'll wrap things up here.
Okay.
So obviously, this is the biggest show in Canada when it comes to cards and collectibles, and I just want to know, like, something in the NFL that happens in every sport, hockey, basketball, but jersey swaps are big in sports. Did you ever do a jersey swap, or is there anyone you wanted to do one?
So watch this. I remember after the first year, there was an exhibition basketball game in I know is it Rogers where Maple Leafs would at least play right now? Is that
right now?
What do they call that?
Scotiabank Arena.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whatever it was like an old school. It looked like this with ice in it. Wherever they played back in the 90s.
Yeah. Oh, Maple Leaf Gardens.
The
Gardens. Back
oh,
in the
okay.
day.
So
yeah,
it was at the Gardens. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I remember, like pinball and some of the guys like, hey, Carl Brazley. They're like, hey man, let's go to a hockey game. So I was like, oh, that's what's up. And I intentionally purchased a Sega. I think Jeremy Roenick was the guy in the front. I forget like whatever the year, but I learned all the rules to hockey so I could. But and then I became pretty good at that game actually. And I just remember we went to the Garden, but it was a hockey game, and I'm sorry, not a hockey game. I'm sorry. We went to the Garden. It was like a basketball game. That's what it was. It was an exhibition basketball game because I think in the works the Raptors were somewhere getting ready to be the seed planted so that the Raptors could be reality.
Yeah.
And so we go underneath, and Charles Barkley, Manute Bol, 2 other guys. Anyway, we're down there shooting the breeze with them because the game is over. And Charles is like, hey, man, I need a jersey. And I was like, wait, what? I was like, Sir Charles needs a jersey from me? What the world? He's like, hey, man. So that was the first time I was like, huh, okay, you can just call guys and get jerseys from them. And so that's the first time it came on my radar. And I never gave him a jersey, by the way. I don't know whatever happened. However, that's what you just talked about from a jersey swap. Now, if I was to like be in my dream world and I grew up a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, right? And because of that, any Pittsburgh Steelers, whatever position I was playing, when I'm playing football in the backyard or in the sandlot or what have you, I was that guy. So I remember the day after the Heisman Trophy, my junior year, the Heisman Trophy was held in the ceremony was held in New York. I was the runner-up. So, but the guy who won it, Ty Detmer, he was out in Hawaii because they had a game in Hawaii, so he couldn't get to New York. So I had to do all the media after that. And so my next day, I had to get up as the loser, or as the first place loser. I had to get up and go do an ESPN show with Mike Lupica and Dick Schaap. And then I had to go and do, CBS had a studio cross, and I had to do I think it was CBS This Morning, some kind of, or NFL Today, I think it was NFL Today. And I didn't watch TV back in the day. And so this is the last story, by the way, so please forgive the long-windedness. And so I went to the studio, and the producer comes up to me. He's like, hey, this is what we have a plan. There's this young quarterback named Randall Cunningham. And Terry Bradshaw, and he said, Terry Bradshaw. I was like, Terry Bradshaw's here? My entire body was a massive goosebump, and I don't remember what else he said after that. And then he took me to the studio, and he's still talking, but I'm slightly deaf after he said Terry Bradshaw. And then I go to the studio, and from about here to that first curtain right there,
yeah,
all of a sudden I look in there, and he's behind the desk, and my body, some kind of hormone was released that I'd never experienced before. And I was like, oh my God, that's Terry Bradshaw. And I couldn't breathe, and all of a sudden just like everything went out of order. And then they go to commercial break. He gets up, and he comes from behind the desk, and then he starts walking, and he's looking at me, and he has a forehead that is shiny, but where the eyes are, it's kind of like Herman Munster. They're way back there in the doggone recesses of his skull. And so it looks extra imposing. And then he comes up to me, and he smiles. He says, hey, Rocket. And I was like, oh. And when I shook his hand, I noticed that my hands, I didn't know this part of your hand could sweat.
Oh, clammy.
My hands were wet. And I was like, oh, my gosh, I'm shaking. And then I went full-blown deaf. I started seeing black spots, and he's talking to me, like explaining what the segment is that I'm going to make a guest appearance on. And I was like, what? And I was just holding on, and I was just like, and then they called him back, and I sat down, and then my body got back to normal, and I thought to myself, I was like, and this was years later, because I didn't know what that phenomenon was.
Yeah.
However,
Shock.
I realized I almost fainted. I literally almost fainted. And I never judged when I would see fans on television. They would go, and they start crying or going to emotional fits. I never judged them again because I was that guy. And as it pertains to jersey swaps, that Terry Bradshaw, Franco Harris, Lynn Swann, John Stallworth, Mike Webster, Ham Lambert, Dagnabbit, Mel Blunt, Donnie Shell, any of those guys, like even to this day, I would love to have a jersey
70s,
from them.
80s Steelers.
That would have been that would have been my jersey swap heaven. So anyway, thank you for letting me ramble. And they gave me it's time to wrap up sign. Enjoy the rest of your magnificent trading card show.
Rocket Ismail.
I had a blast. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
All right, brother.